Why have all these countries gone down? They have taken power over from the British, the Dutch, the French, the Belgians, and look at the Congo. Look at Nigeria. 45 million people. They don't enjoy our standard of living. Vast natural resources. About 20 persons per square mile. Why?
Africa is not the only continent that have been colonized. Nigeria, West African countries are not the only countries that have been colonized. We have a country like Singapore, for example, which was heavily colonized as well.
Yeah.
Yet it was still able to pull its weight and become like a developmental hub for all of the countries in the world.
Yeah.
So what exactly would be the excuse of a country like Nigeria? If you look across West Africa, there was a coup in Niger, there was a coup in Chad, there was a coup in Mali, there was a coup in Burkina Faso, across Sub-Saharan Africa as well. You've seen coups in Guinea-Bissau, there's been a coup in Madagascar. In Tanzania, they had an election, but it was the election was a sham election. Now you're having people being killed for protesting against that election result. So what system of governance do you think is ideal or is best for Africa? Do you think democracy is the best? Or do you think, as some would pose, like we need a benevolent dictator?
I have an issue with Pan-Africanists because they are mostly ideological and almost never pragmatic. Honestly, so what is the end goal of the Pan-African
The
nation?
whole point is that democracy has failed in Africa or is failing in Africa.
Because
you cannot keep on repeating the cycle of voting in selfish leaders who go in there to do their own bidding.
Okay.
So what Africa needs, according to them, are benevolent dictators like Sangari, or like Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
When it comes to blacks as well, he also has this view of blacks that there is something inherently wrong with the black race. He even talks about it majorly in the context of black Americans and all of that. That they are like extremely loud. They are more prone to violence.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say it's because of maybe the culture where they grew up in. He's saying there's something about the black gene itself that causes those sort of traits. Hi everyone, welcome once again to Agora. I'm sure you'll be wondering where have we been, what happened? It's been a long time since we had our last shoot. Maybe we'll talk about that some other time, but today we have something much more pressing to discuss, especially if you're an African or okay, obviously you're Nigerian, you'll be an African, but especially if you're an African or someone of black heritage, right? This is a conversation that you definitely want to listen to. We'll be talking about what is the future of the black race, right? What is the future of the black race? And I'm sure growing up as an African or as someone with a black heritage, you've probably somewhere in the corner of your mind, you've wondered, what exactly is going on with the black race? Why does it seem like Africa or the black race seems to be lagging behind, in terms of human capital development and even like national development, right, as compared to other races, right? So it's something that has definitely been at the back of your mind, I'm sure of that. And today we're going to be diving into that, like what exactly is responsible for underdevelopment within the black race and, in our nations and even the continent of Africa as a whole, right? It's a very interesting conversation, and I want to hear your own perspective as well. So please stay through to the end of the conversation and let's hear your opinions as well in the comment section, right? So with me to discuss this very important topic, I have two of the very best set of people you can discuss this issue with. There are people that are very passionate about seeking for black development, and I think one of them, their favorite color as well, is also black, as you may be able to tell in the shoot. All right, yeah. So on my right, I have with me Semeton. Semeton, it's a pleasure to have you here once again. How are you doing?
I'm good, and it's a pleasure to be back and to see you and to record.
Yeah, it really is a pleasure. The last time you were here, I loved your perspectives, even though we disagreed firmly on them. But it was an interesting conversation. So to be talking about the future of the black race, right? Is this something that has been pressing in your mind, and what exactly do you have to say about the topic itself?
I mean, it's a pressing issue for me as far as I'm concerned. I recently got back from a 2 weeks travel across the West African coast. And
Yeah.
since I got back, I've been discussing with people around me about what exactly is happening here, in this part of the world, especially when you compare it to other part of the world, and also what is happening comparing individual countries as well. And so it's a thing that I'm particularly passionate about because as a black person myself and as someone in Africa and Nigeria in particular, I have to do something with my life. And
Yeah.
one of the key factor to what I'm going to do is my location.
Yeah.
And so if my location is very harsh, and then there is by default a limit to what I can do. And so that is one of the things that forced me to talk about it because it has to be favorable, so to speak.
Thank you for that opinion. Actually, the fact that you traveled across Africa, so it's not like you're just speaking from like a isolated perspective, like maybe Nigeria and all of that. You've been across sub-Saharan Africa
Yeah, I
throughout the
mean, to
world.
an extent, I've been across the major and the prominent West
Yeah.
African countries. I've been up to it
Yeah.
to the eastern region of Ghana. So yeah,
All right. Also, to my left, I have with me Emmanuel as well. Emmanuel is also a co-host of the Perspective podcast. Semeton is actually a co-host of the Perspective podcast. So we have the both of them today. So Emmanuel, I'd like to get your own perspective. Like, what exactly do you think about this issue? How pressing do you think it is? What do you think will be the future of the black race?
All right, so thank you very much for having me. It's been fun coming on Agora Spaces to talk about issues that affect us, affect the African continent, that affect Black people. And I think this one is another of one of those important topics to speak about because it's something that has become apparent to me as I grow older that we have one continent and we're Nigerians, we have one country. When push comes to shove, we are going to go to where we were born. And if our continent, if our country does not develop to a point where we can be proud of it, we can say, oh, I'm Nigerian. And then we're not just saying it because of like national sentiment, or because we have things to be proud of back home. And, that's one thing. And as Josh said, like the world has moved on far beyond where African countries are. And we're in the 21st century, we're getting into the midpoints now. And we're still talking about things that were issues in 1960,
Yeah.
in 1970.
Yeah.
We're talking about them in 2025. So it's something that we should start seeing a difference in how we approach those issues. I know some people say that if you attack a problem with the same method and you're expecting a different result, it's
Yeah.
insanity.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's very important because it's going to a point where it has gone to the point where people would say, oh, like there are people, and it's something that's been said before, the black race is caused, this and that, and we always disagree. But what's the evidence
Yeah.
that we have to show for it? So I thought that's why I think it's important so that we can build a society that we can be proud of and is something that we can live on like a legacy even to our offspring and people coming after us. So that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, it's very important. I agree with that in the sense that, like, you mentioned that fact that we are still dealing with problems that used to happen like in the
In
early
1960s,
90s, yeah, and even the 1960s, yeah. So, I mean, even if you look across Africa, for example, right now, we're having like, I think it was just 2 days ago, there was a military coup that
yeah,
happened in Guinea-Bissau.
yeah, sad.
Military coups, when you look at somewhere like Europe, those were issues that used to happen like 1960s, 1940s. You talk about Franco and all the likes. We're still having things like that happening in Africa today. So I think it brings me down to like the core of the conversation, right? Which is like what exactly is responsible for the the onslaught of underdevelopment. Basically, it's an
Mm.
onslaught. It looks like it's getting worse. I mean, you're seeing places like Mozambique, Niger, Mali that are being conquered by even ISIS.
Mm.
Like primitive people who have extremely primitive ideas taking over those territories. I think it was Mali that ISIS are like literally holding them in a siege right now.
Yeah,
They can't access fuel, they can't access food in the capital
yeah.
because of ISIS. I mean, come on. So when you look at this sort of mirage of issues affecting Africa, poverty, war, religious extremism, diseases, so many things to talk about. But when you come to the crux of it, a lot of people say that maybe they are, or a lot of people fall into three different categories, right?
Mm.
Of what exactly may be the cause of the issue that's facing the black race or Africa as at the core of it, right? We are going to be focusing more on Africa because Africa is like seen as like the homeland for
Yeah,
the
the
black race,
motherland.
actually, like particularly sub-Saharan Africa, right? It's seen as like the motherland of the black race, particularly. So we limit the scope of the conversation to an extent around Africa, but they also talk about other places too. We can also talk about other places too, like the Caribbeans and the likes, right? But when it comes to the issue affecting Africa and the black race. Some people, like I said, fall into three different camps. There is the area of, or like the set of people that believe it is more of like a gene, or how would I put it, like a
It's genetics.
natural, yeah,
Yeah.
like of the natural cause,
Biological.
right? Yes, biological basically, or they use the term eugenics, right? I don't want to dive into that. It's a term that has caused a lot of controversy, over the course of history and all of that. But they say like maybe there's a fundamental flaw in the
Hmm.
makeup of black people generally that is causing this sort of like both individual underdevelopment and even collective underdevelopment like we see in the countries, right? And some other people fall into the camp of, okay, maybe it's like a cultural issue.
Hmm.
Maybe the cultures in Africa, right? The indigenous cultures are not just developed, or rather set up in a way that enables maybe creative thinking, enables exploration, enables virtually ideas that help spark up development,
Hmm.
right? Um, you know, I don't want to call it like genius nature per se, or basically like a culture that sparks up curiosity number one, and then also things that generally help to like promote awareness, more like an improved consciousness basically, and subsequently development.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. Where some people are divided across different camps. Some people speak about, oh, there's something in our nature we are doing. Talk about our culture, maybe our
Yeah,
practices and religious
beliefs.
cultures
Yeah.
and beliefs.
So yeah, that leads me to like the third point actually. So some of the opinion that a lot of the effects that we're seeing, or some of these things that we're seeing, they are a result of like a consequence of colonialism, and even what we call modern day neo-colonialism, right? So you look at things like the transatlantic slave trade, things like even apart from the transatlantic slave trade, they also look at like the trans-Saharan slave trade as
Yeah.
well. A lot of these things left Africans destitute. There was the Arab conquest as well. Then we also had the proper colonialism where, Britain, Germany, and all those other people divided different groups of people, irrespective of their tribe. They just put them into one singular country, primarily for the purpose of like extracting resources, right? And so people have the camp that, this is what is primarily, leading to the current, underdevelopment of Africa and all of that. But then I like us to talk about these three factors, right? Maybe I don't know which one exactly do you lean into? Like maybe Senator, like which of these camps do you feel like is you feel like there's anyone that's like a primary cause, or do you feel like all three of them are involved, and then maybe the one could be like the primary cause, or like an isolated? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I do not agree with the nature thing. I mean, as humans, we are savage, by nature, all of us. There is no society that became whatsoever thing it is today. It took years, and there are so many factors into play. All right. And so I don't think there is enough evidence to suggest that there is something innate
Yeah.
in human beings that will make them prosperous or otherwise. We've seen people across different race that were prosperous and some are not prosperous. So I don't think there is a correlation there
Yeah.
or a causation. I mean, even it might say that, oh, there's a correlation between black countries and the other countries, and maybe there's more development, but doesn't mean like there's a causative factor
Factor.
between them. And so that is one reason why I do not agree with it. Secondly, he actually he set a dangerous tone, because the question you want to ask yourself is that what is the aim of saying that? All right. So, okay, let's grant for a minute that there is something wrong, fundamentally wrong in the biology of the the black people of Africans and
Yeah.
in their continent. Okay, what do you do next? Do you want to kill them? So it actually set a dangerous tone, and moreover, it's short of any attempt to even try to develop the country, because you're already saying that no matter what you do, not going to be any
Effects.
effect, any positive effect, because fundamentally you are not built to have that positive effect. And so, and I've tried to read a lot of scholarship. Obviously, there've been a lot of research done on this, a lot of papers that are actually available. The general academic consensus is to sort of ignore it for those reasons I've mentioned, that it set a dangerous tone,
Yeah.
and it could be very dangerous too, because then you're giving racists like an opportunity to do terrible things. They still
Yeah.
talk about eugenics. You're giving people who believe in stuff like that actually
White.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, to actually have something to do with that. You do mention about culture, which I agree to, but I do not actually think that there is also something that is fundamentally wrong with the culture. I believe culture is shaped by many things, geography, time as well. All right, because culture evolved with time as well. Okay, and I would give more credence to the impact of colonialism and slavery. Okay, I think Africa as a country and as a continent,
Mm.
geographically and ecologically, doesn't have the advantage that some other continent have. You understand? I'm just going to give like just very simple example. Like what is the very first thing that humans started doing? Agriculture,
Yeah.
right? Farming, livestock. Yeah, you're trying to domesticate wild animals. Look at the animals we have in Africa. How many of them can you potentially domesticate? Is it lions you want to start domesticating that are in the Sahara region? Of course not. So when you are in more temperate regions, they had like some of the animals there. I'm just giving a general example now where they might sort of domesticate. So you are able to have livestock, that kind of enterprise
Yeah.
could boom better than in a place like Africa that is not geographically placed. Even the ones that we could have, say cows and the cattle and all of those things, we are plagued with success fly that is also going to hinder the productivity and a lot of diseases that are
Endemic.
endemic
Yeah.
to tropical regions. Talk about the people themselves. You have malaria and all of those things. Of course, they are not excuses. They have to be workaround. But the time you are going to use for the workaround to deal with those problems, you could have used that time to develop your area if the problem does not exist. Also, if you look at the continent in itself, there is this great, it spans along the north to south. All right, so
Yeah.
there's this gap. When you look at Europe, for instance, this seems to be closed up together, and so I think it's easier. It will have been easier for them to meet, you understand, and do trade and exchange trade and move across. There's this, it's more horizontal than vertical, and there are no like thick desert or rainforest to prevent movement here and there.
Yeah.
And so those obviously are like in there like some form of development. And obviously those geography also shape culture in itself because you want to be farmers within certain restrictions that you have, intercultural trade might not be a thing like that because how many other culture do you even have contact with? That kind of thing. The sort of transportation mechanism you would develop in just kind of restriction will be obviously different if you have like this free terrain. You can just move in between. So there are a lot of things that I believe that happened, and shaped the African culture. Even right now, you can just go ahead and say you want to marry anybody because we have things like genotype and all. And so you're already having restriction to the sort of things you can even do biologically that can actually help you as a society. And now I believe those shape our culture in terms of okay, what kind of trade do we do? What kind of government do we run? From the start, they might not be the best, of course, in terms of prosperity, but those are the things we could have worked with at the early days. And so, due to one of some of these things I've mentioned, I want to believe that Europe and some and Asia, Eurasia, for instance, let me just use that since they're almost together, it's a continuous land and mass, right? They had this. I would like to see some advantage in terms of development, all right. And so, due to that advantage, and obviously, they're able to build their military and all of those things, it was easier for them to come to Africa, during this transatlantic trade, even the sub-Saharan trade. And there is something very particular about this that we need to actually, we can't ignore. This thing went on for 400 years or more, like since the 16th century through up to like some aspect of the 18th century. This is an insane amount of time. If you take that out from development, that is a lot. Given what has
Yeah.
happened in the past decade and the world, now imagine what 400 years can mean. And aside from that, that it's not just a stop to development, it's the extraction of people that can cause development. The slave trade basically extracted elegant young people, people that can work,
Able-bodied men and
able-bodied
women.
men and women that can actually contribute. They were extracted, leaving what do we have? The weak ones,
So
technically,
called.
all
Yeah.
right, or some strong ones. And what are the strong ones doing at that point? They formulate policies around extracting other people. Now you have colonialism. What did colonialism do? When the colonial masters were here, they did not come here to just rule and build this place to be conducive for them. They built it or they ruled it to pay them, like in terms of trade. So it was also extractive. So what is left from slave trade, you're coming more to sort of build things. So when you build rails, you build stuff, you're not building there because you're actually building infrastructure. You're building things to extract raw material to transport them back to your own place. And so you have a place that even the little you have that you can build from is still being extracted from. And what would that do to people that are being selected to be those people? You start building a society that is extractive in nature, that is not actually working on the raw material you have to develop your place, but working on those material to still sell them, and which is what we have today. Even in terms of neocolonialism, in the indirect sense, in places like Nigeria and other places where people develop themselves, learn, and then jack back, for instance, you're still extracting the best mind. In some African countries, some West African countries, you still have direct, what's it called? Direct relationship between the countries and the colonial master. When we had a little issue with the Togolese police on my way back from Ghana, and the police officer said, "I'm taking you to the French headquarters." He on the night he stressed the French. I don't know whatever that means, making them understand that they are still under the direct control of French. 2025. That is insane. So how do you expect that sort of society to build something really for its own people? There's still some influence, there's still some extractive thing that will go in, whether or not they like it.
Yeah.
And so those are like some of the bigger reasons I think Africa as a continent,
Yeah.
all right, and maybe even West African in particular is actually stunted when it comes to growth and development, and nothing about gene, all of those things. I don't buy it.
Okay, I agree with you in the sense that yes, I believe that okay, maybe the primary cause may be um, colonialism actually, like at least for this point in time. But then there's always this point of view that other people will raise, which is that Africa is not the only continents that have been colonized. Nigeria, West African countries are not the only countries that have been colonized.
Mhm.
We have a country like Singapore,
Mhm.
for example,
Yeah.
right, which was heavily colonized as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the resources were extracted from them. We have some countries like India
Oh yeah.
as well, a huge landmass that was,
Yes.
under the British control for a long period of time.
Mhm.
You can call up to 10 of those countries, right, that have also suffered that. China was also colonized by Japan at some point in time in their history.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into all
And
of this. And even in Europe as
we
well.
have places like Ethiopia that was not even colonized at all, and then
Yeah, anyway.
I get
All
that.
right. So they always bring up that point of view in the sense that there really is no excuse for Africa. If a country like Singapore, as small as it is, as limited as its influence may have been in terms of the country,
Yeah.
in terms of being a small country, yet it was still able to pull its weight and become like a developmental hub for all
Yeah.
of the countries in the world.
Yeah.
So what exactly would be the excuse of a country like Nigeria
Yeah.
that
I mean,
like
this.
10
I
times
mean,
the
that's a very valid
10
point.
times the population, have massive like Nigeria has like the 10th largest oil reserve in the world.
Yeah.
So what exactly is our excuse for still remaining 65 years plus after independence?
Yeah.
Can we really bring up the excuse of colonialism again?
I don't think enough time has passed. And you mentioned the Kwan's point I wanted to make was he came to Africa. I think I was telling Josh some days ago that when he came to Africa and figured out the way not to be an independent nation, he visited 17 African countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, and Tanzania. And then he had different lessons from each other. So let me just highlight the three of them: Ghana, Nigeria, and Tanzania. So he came to Nigeria, met with Tafawa Balewa. And then one of the things that struck him was how Anglophile Tafawa Balewa was. And I was trying to sound like British.
Yeah.
He came to Lagos, he saw a lot of Washington was British like. They kind of felt like colonial masters were gone, but their vestiges were still there. And it seemed like we were trying too hard to be like them. So in his mind, it was like you can't just accept everything. There has to be some interrogation of some of the British practices. Maybe try to like form your own sort of ideology and stuff like that.
Why have all these countries gone down? They have taken power over from the British, the Dutch, the French, the Belgians, and look at the Congo. Look at Nigeria. 45 million people. They don't enjoy our standard of living. Vast natural resources. about 20 persons per square mile. Why? I've asked myself this often. Why? Because I must know the reason, otherwise I cannot fulfill my simple elementary function as a minister of the Singapore government.
And then he also spoke about the issue of tribalism, especially as it relates to
Yeah.
where in his mind he felt like he had stronger tribal sentiment than national cohesion
Yeah.
and unity. And he said that was going to be a big problem. He visited Nigeria.
Did he propose any like solution?
I'm going to get to
Alright.
that. So he visited Nigeria in 1966. That was the year of the. He came in January. It's a very crazy point. He came to Nigeria. It was in Federal Palace Hotel. It was a heavy police presence. Because then we started having issues with riots in the southwest,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
north, and some pogroms against the Igbos. There was in Nigeria in January. And then the same thing is still saw. Some of the issues that people were telling him about are like, oh, the British put the political power in the hands of the northern
Yeah.
Muslims, and then people in the south were, obviously were not happy about it. And so it already created like a chasm of conflict already between the north and the south. By the time he left, he got to Ghana, and 3 days later, he had the coup. Papa was killed. And then in his mind, he's like, this is
So
clearly not a
it's-
way
yeah.
because we can't allow tribal sentiment to
Override
override national
cohesion.
cohesion.
And I tell you, there are many reasons. First, the will to be a nation. If a group of human beings do not want to together constitute a nation, nothing can make them other than superior force. That's what the Dutch and the British did with their empires, and the French. Whether you like the other chap or not, I say that you together constitute my colony, and you are all British subjects or French citizens or Dutch protected persons and so on. Now, each one of them have taken over. And a heterogeneous lot have taken over. And that variegated group must agree that they want to be a people. From the rest in the region, preserving our tolerant, permissive society, our own way of life, and very high standards. But to do that, you must have the will, the capacity to express your desire in an effective way. In other words, you must have leadership. There's no use saying, the Nigerian people believe so and so. Which Nigerian people? East Nigeria, West Nigeria, Midwest Nigeria, North Nigeria?
Then he got to Ghana, he met with Kwame Nkrumah, one of the leaders of Ghana's independence struggle. And then Kwame Nkrumah had bold ideas for industrialism. So they had the Akosombo Dam that they built, they had the Volta Dam, and then the Akosombo Dam was something he spoke in particular that led to some problems. It was this ambitious problem, so they borrowed a lot of money.
Mm.
So down the line, they started running into evidence at a very early stage. So it was very bold ideas, but they were not pragmatic. To sort of like fit the realities of that kind of like increasing funds and all those kind of things. And then they decided to establish 64 national companies.
Moving to socialism.
Yeah, almost socialism. And then there was funding problems too. There was mismanagement, there was corruption. So in Ghana, I started thinking about like corruption is going to be a big problem if, as a developing nation, you don't work on it, and then you allow people to just do anything they want. When it got to Singapore, that was one of like cornerstone of his own government. Corruption was a no go there. So like there was stiff punishment for corruption. Like everybody knew that if you are corrupt, though,
You're out.
you're out. Then he went to Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, and then he made a comment about him that the man was a good Christian, quotes Bible, but he didn't understand economics. He was shit at economics. And what did Julius want? Julius wanted to build these agrarian communities where people were farming, and then the produce could be used for everybody. So you build schools in the community, have healthcare there. But then it was like when these people leave their houses, like who's going to take care of the house? Like they were trying to reject every form of capitalism. trying to,
Be
this,
as communist as possible.
yeah, this idea of Pan-Africanism, let's go back to our roots. And then about 13 million people were moved to those sort of areas forcefully. Some people even died
Wow.
in the process of trying to build those communities. And they failed because they had these agricultural boards that would purchase the produce at very uncompetitive price because they're the only ones buying it. So there was no like, oh, this person is bidding, it's whatever price they set. So in the long run, people who were farming were not incentivized to produce better things. So, and that's how they organized the community, the economy. And then they nationalized every country. So whether you're British or anything, it became Tanzania, and then started running into issues of proper management, issues of complexity, like how do you handle complexity, and just state capacity as well. And so he told the other line, a lot of African countries, especially when just became independent, they were trying to reject every Western idea, every Western ideology, with a lot of socialism, a lot of Pan-Africanism, and he went the other way around that you have to be pragmatic. You can't just throw away the baby with the bathwater. Like you have to pick things that will work
Yeah.
based on your reality.
Many failures in the third world were the result of the leaders of the immediate post-independence period, the 1960s to the 80s, abiding by the theory then prevailing that socialism and state enterprises would hasten development. Their interventionist economic policies led to a misallocation of resources and increased opportunities for corruption. That theory was demolished as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union. There is no reason why third world leaders cannot succeed in achieving growth and development if they can maintain social order, educate their people, maintain peace with their neighbors, and gain the confidence of investors by upholding the rule of law.
You have to push for meritocracy. You have to build stronger institutions. One of the things we did was have this free market society where different companies would come and they knew that, oh, the government was going to support them. There's no one that's going to nationalize company in the long run. Because if you're nationalizing company, it means 2 4 years later, nobody's going to come to your country.
Yeah.
Because in the example of Tanzania, by the time Julius was leaving, they were one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah.
Compared to when he became president. And he saw that. I was like, nah, like you cannot say, oh, we don't want capitalism, and then go all the way to the other side. Because even we see other countries like China who tried it, then end in disaster.
Yeah.
China to have this farming policy as well, and then it led to famine where there was not enough food produced because there's humans work with incentive. Like there has to be something that incentivizes you. And if you remove all those kind of incentives and you want to build this utopia of a socialist country and there was like a planned economy, it doesn't always work. And that's like some of the lessons that he learned.
Okay.
Was able to help Singapore.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
This is basically the Paris model of economics from his lessons in Africa.
Yeah.
But then, so basically, you agree with the point that we really cannot give colonialism as an excuse anymore.
Yeah, probably in the initial stage, it affected us.
Yeah, I mean, and
As you mentioned, extracting resources, and some of the problems. I think you mentioned it as well, Josh, when you said about bringing people. Was it? I don't know if it was Senate that mentioned bringing different people, different countries that probably do not have anything in common.
Yeah.
For example, we have Nigeria where South, North, like there's not a lot of common between we and them. There's more commonality between like people on this side, people with Benin, for example. We have a lot of European groups there, even Togo, even Ghana, like even now that I didn't even realize until recently, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that Ghana was not our neighbor.
Yeah,
how close.
There's Togo, there's Benin,
but then it seems like we are together. But then we are in the same country with
all that.
Yeah. There's not that lot of connectivity. And so that's one of the big issues. Like the artificial borders that colonialism
Great.
created, and then the disruption in our own economic development. Like you mentioned, as you said, 400 years is a long time. Who knows what we would have done during that period? Some people just conclude that, oh, like, Africans don't have any sort of history, Africans don't have any sort of, like, development, but who knows what would have happened because everything was disrupted. So, yeah, I agree that colonialism played a part. But right now in 2025, we should have moved past.
So what do you think is like the primary cause right now? Like,
Yeah, some of it was lack of pragmatism, especially from more ideologically inclined leaders in Africa. We had a lot of them. I mean, Kuma was a very ideological person. Julius Nyerere, Patrice Lumumba, they were very ideological, but the ideologies came, it affected their economic prowess.
yeah,
So I feel like they did not pay enough attention. So they had these lofty ideas of prosperity
yeah.
that did not materialize
I think
because they
many
were
of
not
them,
pragmatic.
many of them chose the wrong side, the wrong side of
Yes,
history.
because eventually most of them
Chose
ended up being,
socialism.
being
Socialism.
killed through in coup. Like a lot of
Yeah.
them, not just like when I started realizing that a lot of these other guys too, even from Nkrumah in Ghana, the same 1966 that we had our coup, they had a coup in Ghana as well, and people celebrated for you to know how
How
terrible
bad it was.
it was for them as
All
well.
right. So basically the pragmatism of African leaders is one
Yes,
that's
at the beginning stage,
okay.
then
At the beginning stage.
mismanagement.
What about currently? Like,
Yeah,
is it just poor leadership that you itemize as like the primary reason for the black race being held?
I think so. For me, poor leadership.
Anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, yes. For leadership is obviously one. However, you can only pick leader from a group of people,
Mm.
you know. And of course, we can't. Colonialism is not the primary reason why we are facing problem today. I've just highlighted that to show what our history was about and the reason why we probably landed where we are today. Of course, it's going to be it can be corrected, but it's difficult. All right, you obviously need leaders that are visionaries. They can because you need people to now create a vision since we never had one.
Yeah.
All right, and we've always fallen short at that. But this is the thing: you need a leader from a group of people. We are illiterate. Let's start with that. What do we even know to start with? So by the time you want to select leader, what kind of leaders are you even selecting? What kind of things do they even know? You see, we Nigerians complain a lot. I'm going to use Nigeria for instance about light, but Nigerians have not really taken action about electricity. We complain a lot, but we've not really taken action. But why haven't we really taken actions? It's because we've not experienced what it means to enjoy uninterrupted power supply. If you have enjoyed uninterrupted power supply for 365 days, there is no way
Hmm.
you will be okay with
Not
a
having it.
president punishing you with like haphazard life supply. And so we have a group of people that are ignorant about many things, about what it means to even live a life that is worthwhile. You understand? And so out of them, you then pick leader. At the end of the day, you are still going to end up with policies around, oh, let's just feed the people, let's just these very reactive policies, not actually a policy that is driven towards an actual development. And then you have people trying to stay in power as well because they know that is a fragile thing. It's not that maybe you are building this society where people actually are building towards a thing. People are just trying to survive, and so they need to stay there because they know that once they're out of that place, then they themselves they run at the risk of suffering what the populace are suffering. And so, what do? They have to get people who can help them retain this kind of leadership position or that power in place. And what are the kind of people you get? Obviously not necessarily people that are smart enough. Because by the time you get people that are smart enough,
Choose
they will,
loyalty over
yeah,
merit.
they choose loyalty over merit and over which. So we actually lack vision
All right.
right now, when it comes to leadership. And that is the problem with many African countries, especially West Africa to begin with, Because you want to ask, which president or what leader have we had that has given us an idea of what he wants the country to look like after his 8 years in office? At least we know most of them want to go 2 times. In Nigeria, for instance, we've never had any in recent time. Like by the time the Barack government was coming in, aside from the mantra of change, there was really nothing that we had an idea of what the country would look like.
Yeah.
Oh, like okay, in the next 8 years that we're going to be in power, This is what you.
Expect.
We've never had anything like that, really. Those are the things. Those are like it. They are sound bites. Let's be honest. Like, what does one naira equals to $1 mean, really? And so we've not really had like visionary leaders that are actually building towards something. Right now people don't have anything that we're building towards. There's no really sense of identity in terms of okay, what are we even building towards? And so people will always still go along the tribal line. At least let's protect and let's ensure that our own tribe survive,
Okay, so
irrespective of what
But
happens.
yeah, I want to mention, you said like we have not seen what other people. But I look at like some people, usually the people that champion about independence. A lot of these guys studied abroad. They saw what those societies look like, and I think that's one of the reasons why they had, that they had this very great zeal,
ideally,
and they saw how, especially how black people were treated in those countries, like especially US and UK, and that was one reason why they felt so strongly that we had to be independent, because they realized that if African countries, and it's something that's even apart to now, if African countries are not free and not prosperous, it affects how black people are treated in other
We are
countries.
perceived.
Yeah, and they have their own vision. Although some of them, I said, some of them were not pragmatic. Another person that I felt like was being pragmatic with his ideas was, I don't know, in the southern region.
Yeah.
He was very pragmatic. Some of the things he proposed for education, for example, cocoa house, and encouraging economic activities around cocoa, building the first admission station, Liberty Stadium. Those are like visionary stuff, yeah. But I still agree with the partner. We don't have enough visionary people. And now it seems like everybody gets into power. You don't even have any vision.
yeah, okay. So I like that. I like when you stop that point actually, because it's something I wanted to raise as well,
Yeah.
right? In the sense that I think we've all agreed that okay, primarily at this point in time,
Yes.
right in our history, one of the major reasons for the black race currently failing or currently being underdeveloped, and particularly the nations right of the black race like Nigeria and other West African countries and sub-Saharan countries, is because of lack of visionary leadership, lack of pragmatic leaders as well, basically lack of good leaders. So, but then how exactly do you bring in these good leaders, right? The Western countries came up with a system of democracy,
Yeah.
right? And then, over the course of the colonialism, well, this is a Western country, if you ask
Well,
that, right? So, all right. So, following through up until now, right? They ended up, colonialism happened actually, and they brought in this system of democracy to us, which we received as Africans, and we've been adopting it pretty much since our independence. But recently, it seems like that trend of democracy is starting to like have cracks in the walls, particularly across sub-Saharan Africa. Like, I mean, like in West Africa, for as an example, you look at across West Africa, Niger, there was a coup.
Francophone countries mostly.
Yes, there was a coup in Niger. There was a
Mali.
coup in Chad. There was a coup in Mali.
Burkina Faso.
There was a coup in Burkina Faso. Across Sub-Saharan Africa as well. You've seen coups in Guinea-Bissau. Just like last week or so. There's also a coup in there's been a coup in Madagascar. In Tanzania, they had an election, but it was the election was a sham election. Now you're having people being killed for protesting against that election result. You understand? Um, I mean, it just looks like democracy all across Africa is starting to fall. Even the ones that are so-called stable democracies, like Togo, for example, the Togo and Cameroon. In Cameroon, you have a 91-year-old Paul Biya.
I think
91-year-old, and he's ruling. I mean, according to the West, they say they are stable democracies,
Yeah.
but they are just controlled autocracies, right? So you have a 91-year-old winning an election with over 80% of, even 90% of the votes and all of that. I mean, obviously, those elections look like TV elections, sham elections. So, but then, like, some people are obviously getting weary of democracy in Africa. Like the fact that it's not working. Some are like advocating for military. We are seeing military rule rising across the continent now. It's looking like it may not even be a good alternative to, because even in Mali, the militants are still taking over power. The military came into power in Mali. They said they wanted to evacuate the insurgents. Yeah. And now you're having insurgents holding the capital city on siege, like in Bamako. So all those things are happening. So what system of governance do you think is ideal or is best for Africa? Do you think democracy is the best, or do you think, as some would propose, that we need a benevolent dictator in Africa, a benevolent dictator?
I don't think we need to benefit. I don't think democracy. Now, you've mentioned some of the things. I think both of you did a good job mentioning this that happened, sharing with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Now, I saw a post about how Western societies evolved and became what we know.
Yeah.
And it is easy on three core parts. You have Greek analytical thinking and democracy. Look at everything from philosophers like Plato, Socrates, like trying to picture what a society should be like, and about questioning things like how does the environment, what is in the air, what is in the
Basically,
river,
curiosity.
curiosity.
Yeah.
Then you have Roman law,
Yeah.
and then you have like their Christian values and
Yeah.
all those kind of things. And I think that for African countries, especially in this period, to actually develop, we need to start from formulating our own sort of ideology. And I look at countries like Saudi Arabia and see how they sort of like reorganize their society to reflect their realities. And seeing how for a long time they were really restricting around their really participating in the rural society. They have Saudi women having more freedoms compared with women in the Western region. And looking at it, this are these places like Afghanistan are clearly formed by Islamic governments, it's the men child there, stop them from going to school, force them to wear burqas and hijabs. And look at what is this future for those types of societies. And looking at even African countries as well, if we don't start to like fantastic, what are things that work? You can blame any system, be it socialism, be it communism. If those form of government here do not reflect like modern realities of the day, how do you care for them? How do you feed your people? How what else are going to look like? What's the educational system going to look like? How are people going to participate? How are you going to mobilize capital? Like those are the basic problems that any government face, whether you're democratic or you're a military government. That's one of the reasons why I remember telling my younger brother that I don't believe the military government is capable of doing anything anywhere because they are not equipped to do, they are not trained to do that. What soldiers are trained to do is to fight wars, to manage their members of their team, to be commanders. That's what they are good for, like command and control. They are not good for like organizing entire systems of production, for example.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think that whatever system of government choose to practice must be something that looks at okay, in the 21st century, how do governments around the world care for their people, provide for their people, create an equitable society that works for each one? Because looking at like an individual, like what will make an individual um, flourish or develop is when he's able to contribute to the society, when he's able to attain certain, we talk about Maslow's law of
And
hierarchy.
hierarchy of needs, yeah.
Yeah, we are still stuck at the level of
Then survivor.
feeding, survival, those sort of things. So our society is going to get to a top point where we cannot start to worry about, when is being back playing.
Okay, so but then like yeah, I understand the consequence you're raised right now, but we having to introspect to find out exactly our core values as a society, and then from
Yes.
there we can shape in the system of governance. But like I think those are like more like long term approaches in the sense that I don't think you can within the next 2, 3 or 5 years in Nigeria
Yeah, true.
easily craft out just
It is going to be a long process. I agree.
yeah. So but then like pending that time when we get there, like do you feel like the democratic system as it exists in Africa is ideal, or do you feel like are you of the view rather that maybe if you have like a benevolent dictator like I was like others have been insinuating, right? The benevolent dictator may create like an avenue for us to introspect and eventually find out those values for ourselves, right? Like for example, we look at somewhere like China. Like China was like fundamentally communist and all of that, and then she came in. I think there was someone before she as well. Come out. Yeah, he also was. I think he was even the initial person that started like the whole opening up of the economy and all of that, right? So he had those sort of what you may call it benevolent dictators that came in, made some core reforms into the country, right? That created the platform that from there they were able to spring up. So do you think Africa needs that sort of situation or that sort of intervention?
I think it's different.
Yeah.
Because I think about China, like even historically, we've always had a strong civil service base.
Yeah.
They've been writing civil service exams since like 17th century, 16th century, that far back. We don't have something of that similitude here. And even at points when China was strictly communist, they went open up, they still had like their committee. They have the standing committee. They come up with policies. They come up with like how do you want the country to look like? What should the country do? You can if you have a benevolent dictator and there's no institution around it, it's still going to fail. And that's why Russia's system did not succeed.
Okay. So, but what then we now prefer as like the solution? Like, yeah, we just have to go through the long route,
It's
the
going
long
to be
process.
it's going to be long. Yeah. And Joshua said it like we need education. Like a lot of people who are in positions of leadership, I don't think there's some of them are very literate, they and for the PhDs, doctorate degrees. So some of them are do not classify as being illiterate.
Yeah.
But some other people maybe they just have like secondary school certificate and probably did not even pass. Some of them probably failed. So they have those set of people. But I see that there's sometimes isn't that much of a difference between those who just graduated with a pass or maybe they failed, and those who have PhDs. When it comes to like governing the people, they still do the same things. They still say the same things. There's not much difference. I think that one of the things we can do is probably improve our standards of education and sort of introduce a method of educating potential leaders because, say, for example, in Britain, most of their prime ministers have either gone to Oxford or Cambridge. And they studied either PPA, philosophy, politics, and economics. Like most of their prime ministers. If you look at them from the current one down um, to like 6, 7, 5 of them. In the US, you have most of them is studied law. Um, I don't know what Biden studied, but Biden went to a good school. So you have Harvard graduates, you have people who went to MIT, leading the country.
Okay.
In China, their own system is you attend school, but you start from grassroots. You start leading a small group of people, then you manage a region. So before you
That's
get to
how
the
the
point,
communist
yeah,
party.
because Xi Jinping started from leading like
Yeah,
a
it
small
was.
local government, then the city, then he went to a region, then he joined the standing committee, then he won the election. Like everybody thinks that China is like they have elections for those sort of like rules here. So we have to have. I think that Africa needs to our countries in Africa needs to start thinking of like how do we develop leaders, what structure do we put in place. So not just anybody. Because they have to start thinking about issues of governance. Like
Yeah.
to lead people is hard. Like Josh and I have had some experience, like having to lead people in school is very difficult to do. And if you don't have people who have been trained, who understand how complex system works, you mentioned the issue of electricity. Electricity is not something easy to overcome. We generate more than we distribute, not fix that problem in the last 30 years. And that shows you that it's not a simple problem. But because we don't have people who are being trained to know how to fix complex problems, we keep making the same mistakes.
Okay. So, but then only get senator's perspective, right? So I was making a point like when it comes to Africa and how democracy seems to be failing in Africa, both from the point of military coups and even the fact that people are not seeing the dividends of democracy, what you expect to see, like economic benefits and the likes. So would you support the notion that some people raise, right, that we need or Africa needs benevolent dictators to get the ground running, right? To the structures in place for any sort of future governance to run smoothly? Or are you of the opinion that we still have to maintain the trend of democracy
That I
that we
have the
find this
potential of failing.
critical?
Okay, so okay, let's think for a moment. Let's say we should try we should give benevolent dictatorship a try. Just for a moment. Not experiment. Who let's take Nigeria for instance.
Yeah,
Who should be the one? Who should be our candidate among the plethora of potential candidates that we have? Let's think about it for a moment. And do you think with what you're thinking in your head, okay, do you think they can execute it? All the people that we have right now, from state level to the federal level. I think there is a human capital problem, bottom up and
top down.
top down as well. All right. When the military coup, let's say in a place like Burkina Faso, for instance, the opinions are divided. You have a lot of learned people in West Africa that think it's a good thing. And you start to think and you ask yourself, like, okay, what am I missing? Like, is there something I'm missing? There is no way you would think military leaders are equipped to lead a country in 21st century. They're not even equipped to match up with what is happening economically around the world. These guys are not equipped to do that. Right? Is it Tare that want to match up with Trump and other guys? Clearly, they are not in that same category. But somehow some people are celebrating it. And then you start to think and like, okay, if these are the so-called Neletot people that are celebrating military coup, then there's something wrong with our human resource. Why do we have leaders that do not know anything, that probably fail or that we don't even know whether they finished their secondary school, leading the people? Because there is a large population of people that will vote them. All right. Three of us are probably not going to vote somebody whose result is in contest. All right, that we are not even sure whether or not he has it. But for the three of us, there are millions of people that will gladly vote them in just because they are promising them the same thing. And that's why you're saying that there's so much difference between the so-called PhD holders and the ones that not. Because the people, they don't need a change. You know exactly the formula. So I just need to repeat the same formula. All right. So once I do road, I'm good. I've done the best, not even the best,
Dividends.
exactly. And so we have that, we have a large population that is very, very deficient, intellectually. Again, this has nothing to do with the gene. It's just that we don't just have capital. Like we are empty upstairs. Let me just put, I mean, that's the best way I can, that's the nicest
Not
way I can
enough.
actually do it. And so you still want to get leaders in that pool of people. So you're already at a disadvantage. Let's even suppose you're able to now get somebody who is able to see the vision. You need people to support you. You need 200 million people, for instance, in the West African country of Nigeria to support whatever thing you're doing. That's the only way you can gain, like, so you can have some success, whatever vision you have. More than half of those people are illiterate. So how do you even rally them around a unified cause? Because sometimes they are most of them are still in this whole point of survivor. They still want to eat, they still want to drink, and so you still have to hang them like handout of money, conditional cash transfer, and that's what people will vote about. So what do I think needs to happen? I don't think we need a form of benevolent dictatorship because we're just going to keep repeating the same cycle.
Yes, what you
I
say.
think the one of the reasons why democracy is failing in like West Africa is because there is no trust in the leadership. And that's why there is always this debate to like, oh, we are celebrating it. Some people are even clamoring for it. It's because they do not trust the current system and they feel like maybe the military leadership would fix, for instance, the corruption, right? But they don't know
How do you
any
fix the
better.
system?
So yeah, I think we still have to safeguard democracy because that's still our only hope, especially because in democracy, for instance, you are forced to build democratic institutions. You have like the house, you have like the state, you have like the federal government. I mean, these things are not perfect, but they just decentralize things in such a way that at least you can have development in pockets of the country. And maybe with that, we can have some things up. So I think it has to be a combination of long-term plans and short-term plans. Most of the leaders we've had have they just major in the short-term plans. And that is why we are not seeing any major change. I think you still need the short-term plans. Like, for instance, some of the conditional cash transfer, like, some of the loans that they hang out for market women and all. I mean, since that's what we still do. However, you don't have to major in that. Just some percent, maybe 40% of your policies to be around that. Then the ministry then should be around, okay, we need to build infrastructures, we need to connect regions together. Like a project like the coastal highway. I love the idea because think about it. If you are able to travel from Lagos, say to the capital city of Cross River, Calabar, for instance, in 4 hours, can you imagine the amount of economical growth that can happen along the coastal line? In matter of say 10 years, for instance. Of course, so we need project like that, but you need to also augment that by other stuff that will pacify the people in the meantime and execute those projects. Not that you just announce them and then you do money there and nothing's happening. People are still going to lose trust in what you're doing. So we need like we need projects like that. We need infrastructure projects. We need like policies. We don't have to be afraid. If we have to restructure, we should restructure. First of having security challenges in Nigeria, and one of the last tweet the president put out that is encouraging state policing. We need stuff like that. You understand? So at least at the state level, we know that each state is protecting its own citizens. Now we have widespread, what's it called? At least apparent widespread insecurity. If out of 36 states and one federal capital territory, 10 are able to safeguard their own state. At least that we have 27 left to undo. At least there's some progress with that. So I think that those are the things that we can consider. We need to safeguard our democracy, and then we stay now need to build up from there. Educate people, invest in the education, and not just send them to school, but quality education. Personally, I would want Nigeria to either go along regional lines or state lines. Honestly, we should most of the things that are centralized should come down.
to the
Like
regions.
state policing and all of
Yeah.
stuff like kind of thing. At least each state we have to develop their area, their region, and maybe that will kind of signal other states that maybe we need to also sit up all these handout that are going out to state at the end of the month, at the end of the year. We need to start reducing them, and everybody should go back and build their own, their own state or their own region. At least that way you're able to vote for that Shukura because it's from your for your state governor, what have you. I mean,
Okay.
to some extent,
Right.
that is what I think. I don't think military government is going to save anything. It's just
Yeah,
going to
but
keep
that
repeating the
well,
same thing.
yeah, all right. So I don't think I agree with your point actually about civil democracy, right? So, but then there are also perspectives like maybe the benevolent dictators you're talking about. I don't think a military government per se fits into that role. Um, there is to an extent, I think I don't know if you've heard of like this Burkina Faso leader the trending that's been trending a lot in Pan Africanism
Sorry?
and travel, right?
Yeah.
Wahid, right. So I think he for some Pan-Africanists, he mirrors a close image of what they expect a benevolent dictator to do, in the sense that he took power away from some corrupt elites. And according to some folks as well, they're at least seeing much more stability and the dividends of democracy as compared to when there was a democratic leader
So my question is,
elected. And
what
then
has
also,
the result been in Burkina Faso?
well, obviously things could be better, but at least I think for the bulk of people that support him, they feel like there is still a lot of upward momentum that they are still seeing,
But
right?
like
And they also feel like he's also facing a lot of pushback as well from Western leaders as well because of the fact that they were
excuses. This is all I hear.
yeah
I,
right.
I have an issue with Pan Africanists because they are mostly ideological and almost never pragmatic, honestly. Like, so what is the end goal of the Pan African
The
nation?
whole point is that democracy has failed in Africa or is failing in Africa. And we
Because,
cannot keep on repeating the cycle of voting in selfish leaders who go in there to do their own bidding.
okay,
So what Africa needs, according to them, are benevolent dictators like Sangari. They feel like Traore is like the reincarnation, the coach of Sangari, right? Sangari took over and he made a lot of reforms, both for in terms of like the economic model of the country, or they were pivoting towards socialism, right? And then he also made a lot of reforms culturally as well for women's rights and that.
You know the thing
Right.
of
So, but if you like, if it's obviously like, you can't really tell who will be the benevolent dictator. It's hard to tell before they get into power. But if you're able to, by some chance, get one in, that will be able to set the country on the right path.
I just agree. And the reason is the evidence points otherwise. We've had those people before. I feel like that's what's part. some of the Africans are forgetting what happened post 1966. We are mostly military leaders all across West Africa, Central Africa. It was probably late 90s that started saying we turn to democracy. So we've had them. If they were good, we would have gone back to democracy.
Yeah.
Like when Abacha died,
Well,
imagine the
there's a
jubilation on
case
the
of
streets.
sure, nobody categorize Abacha as a benevolent. Yeah. But
But
then there's a
because
case of
we've seen attempts at having that. Buhari tried,
yeah,
Murtala tried, Gowon tried, Obasanjo tried as the military president. They all failed.
yeah. But then there's like the case of first things first, Western pressure against any sort of dictatorship, whether it's benevolent or not. They put sanctions on those countries, which obviously, whether or not they are
Useless.
performing, have failed.
I
It's
think
dampened
that's
them.
just
And secondly, as well, um, you know, the the bulk of the military leaders that we've had in those schools previously, even protected today as well, they have been also it's still the same. They don't qualify as benevolent dictators. Benevolent dictators, according to them, will be people like Xi Jinping, people like this El Salvador current ruler, what is his name? Nayib Bukele. Nayib Bukele. Yeah, he may qualify according to them. Those are the kind of people that qualify as benevolent dictators because they put in. I mean, you can't dispute with the fact actually, right? At least for Nayib, I don't know, yeah. For Nayib, he came in. El Salvador was like the worst country in terms of murder rates in
yeah,
the world. And he came in, he
gang
cleaned up
and
the
stuff.
entire, exactly, he cleaned up the gas. He carried out a lot of authoritarian actions in the process, but the results are there to speak for themselves. So when you see things like that happen, it's obviously it's credence to some of what they will say. But then that's an argument for another day. All right. So let's dive into the third factor, which is probably the most controversial one. I don't know if you've heard of like this online commentator Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's been gaining traction a lot in the online space, political space generally. And one of the things he says, he pushes eugenics theory basically. Saying that different groups of people, different ethnicities exhibit certain traits based on their genealogical encoding, basically. Right. So he's generally like more vocal against Jews. Like the things like Jews are domineering and all of that, but then says that there is something about Jewishness, in quotes, that makes them, dominate or prevail over other groups of ethnicities that may be in like a multicultural society, for example, and always tending to try to, according to him, like putting their own interests right above the interests of the collective first. But that's his anti-Semitic take, right? But then when it comes to blacks as well, he also has this view of blacks that there is something inherently wrong with the black race and all of that. He even talks about it majorly in the context of black Americans and all of that. That they're like extremely loud. They are they are more prone to violence.
Yeah,
And he doesn't say it's because of maybe the culture where they grew up in. He's saying there's something about the
okay.
black gene itself that causes those sort of traits and all of that. So, theories like this, they led to sterilization policies, right? Both in Nazi Germany, even in America and in Japan, there were actually sterilization policies based on eugenics theory. Like they literally like sterilize people for the fact that they felt maybe they were of lower IQ or lower desirable traits. Right. So when it now comes to what we are saying in modern society, right? How do you make the distinction between the prevailing underdevelopment of blacks, right? I mean, when you go to America, almost like the poorest communities you see still a black community. When you go to Argentina, you see like this, but it's like almost literally wiped on their community there. When we go to the Caribbean countries as well, like Haiti, Jamaica, some parts of the Caribbean as well, you see that many of these countries are facing similar problems of poverty, disease, form of violence, war leadership, etc. Even the sexual resources in the So, how exactly would you make a case Yeah, this one that the faith is destination of something about the black man faith. Irrespective of wherever the African region we are in, that's disposing God to this college secular point.
I think for one, straight up, but eugenics is pseudoscience. That has been displayed. And as Josh mentioned earlier, there's a lot of literature about that how we have not applied some of those things that it says because of how genetic normality is. That is simply untrue. Yeah. You look at places like America and say, oh, black people are allowed. There's a long history of slavery. There's a long history of segregation, of Jim Crow laws that even the Germans copied to use against the Jews. Like they saw Jim Crow like, wow, this is such a brilliant thing to deal with the Jews. So you see that like there's this historical precedent for these things. And you had a prison system in America that consisted mostly of blacks. For a long time, blacks were going to prison for silly things.
Yeah.
You know, they had gerrymandering laws. So a lot of the context around
There was
those
a documentary I watched that showed that the police system it was also created basically like pretty much to control
yeah.
put the black population reports wherever the government will pay them to be pretty much geared towards the black primary.
Yeah. And you look at even their school system, like the best schools were the white students, the bad schools were the black people. So that's systemic problems. You have issues like businesses so getting support.
Yeah, okay.
The white ones were getting more support, black ones were getting more support. So you have institutional dragging, like the plan by institutional, student access, finances, student access, education, healthcare. It's only until when they have the civil rights movement and we have equal rights as the rest of the people. So, yeah, we have those historical precedents. You cannot ignore all of those things and just jump to there's something wrong.
So now then I think the civil rights was like the 1950s.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when people mention civil rights was in the 1950s. That's just barely 100 years from now. Like, you go.
1950s,
It's not up to. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
I mean, to be gracious, yeah. Many of the systemic problems, 100 years ago. I think you know, if you there is this we all did biology, we all did conditioning. Yes, too. I mean, there's this celebrating what's that experiment? I forgot that experiment where you want to feed the dog, you ring the bell, then you kick the dog, then it starts celebrating. You know that conditioning experiment, and then after a while you start ringing the bell, and the dog starts celebrating, and then you tell the dog, no, there's no food now. We still maybe celebrate down the line, and then we tell people like, but it's already 5 years. Yes, it's already 5 years, but this is something that was passed down for generations. You can't expect it to disappear overnight. You have to put the same concerted effort that match the exact thing that was done to actually erase it. And not just or even it out. Because these are if you are a slave somewhere, your mentality is not ever going to be the same as the free person, even if you are free. Like there is no way your mentality, how you think, how you approach things, how you manage resource, how you see, how you view the world, how you think about, oh, can I get business? There is no way it's going to match the people that were born free. And if you give birth to offspring, there is no way, even if they go to school with them, there is no way. This thing is highly psychological, and you have a population of black people. Let's say I'm still focused on America for instance now, who were basically resisting for years, and then 70 years down the line, they're like, no, you should have matched up with us. Seriously, I think people underestimate. Obviously, you are not facing that problem now, but we are still in the aftermath of it. You cannot even deny that, and it's going to take years for that to erase. And we need concerted effort. Like, what are the effort that is being put into black communities in trying to, you know, just of this area, let me use that word, and not just use the same stigma against them. The stigma too are very, very psychological when they're telling you this and that. I mean, come back to Africa where obviously we are not, we are not like with the white that, that oppressing at all. Again, it is true that we are many years away from colonialism, slave trade at all. But trust me, given the amount of years this thing went on, it is very, very difficult to completely erase the effects they have in our society today, and we can't ignore most of those policies. For instance, if you discover, say, a raw material somewhere, what is the what is the first reaction to it, both at the grassroots level and at the leadership level? It's always extraction. That is the first thing that comes to it. Okay, let's extract. Who's the first person to get there to extract? To do what? First thing, export. Like it's a mindset thing that you have, like you have to be really, really intentional and saying, okay, hold on a minute, let's pause. What are the other areas that we can use this to? But because we are not even grown in the environment in which we are supposed to use resource for different things, just for a set of things that have been practiced over and over, and so those issues persist. Our curriculum, for instance, what is it modeled after? Is it modeled after our own geography, really? Things as simple as the sort of clothing, the choice of clothing that we these things are very, very, if you're in a place like West Africa, it's very hot, it's very tropical. But tomorrow is Monday, you are still expected. We say these things are nothing. They are a lot. You're still expected to go through the Lagos traffic and the hot weather in your suit and your tie, and you'll be penalized if you don't do that. Are we being serious? Like that means that we are not even looking inward. Like for most things that we do, we are not looking inward. And then suddenly when things get to like the larger space, we are like, oh, we should be looking inward. Really? Every step before now, you've not really looked inward for a lot of things. And you expect magic. They look little, but there are a lot that we are still modeling our society and everything we do towards things that don't necessarily fit us. And then we now expect like some dramatic what's it called, results wherever we are. I like to think that a lot of people that have left like African concern, they've done well now. Like people like to say something like wherever black people are, they always, are you serious? When people leave their country, and some of them do very well in other places. It's all not Kemi Badenoch. No matter how, for an example, no matter how she's punching down on our own people, hello, you're still the people at the end of the day, and you're doing quite well.
Ngozi.
So, but then I think the distinction in which that yes, realism happened in Africa, obviously, there's going to be an effect after the changes. And then it also happened in India.
You seem that really the country want to use that like as an example. Seriously.
We have the
I think the only country that really stand out, I'm still gonna say is Singapore. And then again, this is an exception. Sometimes we shouldn't make exception the rule.
No, I think at least other countries have been able to some extent get a form of traction. Okay? Absolutely, it's India example.
India, really?
No, like
India.
India had more of the high and still have the highest rates of
Poverty.
but if you are going to list the top economies in the world at this present time,
Mhm.
right? Or imagine the economies in the world. There is no way not that describing one of them.
Yeah, that's
And then also people beyond just the country of India, look at Indians as well. They are doing fantastically well all over the world. Anywhere you see Indians, most time they tell you associated with that development that exactly by the IT space.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it's developed by Indian technologists as well. They've been in detail as well. I think it was in 2023 there, like the 2024, the number of phones owned by Indians, the number to surpass the United Nation.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you can check that. So, so it seems like
and the other issue is Sunak. You come find
yeah,
us.
yeah. So it seems like they have been able to, and even their nuclear power at this point in time. So they've been able to somewhat
We didn't have business to
gain.
develop
Obviously,
nuclear weapons, but
yeah, true. Yeah, okay. So, but then they've been able to gain some sort of traction in their country, as compared to other African countries. I mean, what would have been like that is the symbol of success saying for the September.
oh,
But even though even after post appetite, so after they decline, yeah, massively post up. So it's even like a it's literally a massive thing.
yeah.
The funny thing about that
It's almost
was
like you just
they were being led by
Yeah.
the white Afrikaners, and now they are being led by the indigenous black population, and then we're having this cultural mask. This Zuma is going to check up right now. I mean, so it's like, why it's hard to argue against. I need to be honest.
Yeah.
Although I know it's not true, right? But it's hard to argue against. And I feel like we tend to shy away from the conversation. I don't think criminalizing is a I think it's this. I'm just going to speak from my own side. I think I've asked you guys your first session, like, to be from direct and come down to our country. You know, it's, yeah, we have a very selfish culture.
I know, I like voice. I really want to dispute that point. African societies are mostly communal. What is
Let me
selfish
explain
about
what I mean by the
that?
selfish culture. Let me explain what I mean by the selfish culture. Truly, a communal, I mean, but the communality or communalism is usually centered around external family. Which is inherently selfish. Now, let me explain something. If you want to go out today, there's a protest against bad governance in Nigeria. Man, you cannot call your mom and say, Mom, you're not to be protest. You can't call your parents and your African parents and tell them that's not. What would be the wait? Sorry, what would be the
My mom protested.
They don't again. He is a great this for that.
But let me explain.
You can't ignore
Hey,
what
let
I
me
asked
explain.
you previous. My mom protested. She was tear gas. She tells me this thing. She was a student. She saw her classmates die. You can't expect that same person who went through that trauma and other people's parents to
But
not
when you
come
read
to
the
the story.
story, when you read the story of all these other countries that broke out from the separate, talking about before everyone's,
Yeah.
you read the stories, it was built on blood.
Yes.
People put aside selfish interest. In Nigeria, for example, the best of the best of the one of our brightest minds, as soon as they come out of school, as soon as they've done their NYC or whatever, the next thing that's on their mind is what? JAPA.
There's also
It is a selfish nature. No, please, let me explain. Now, I'm not saying it is wrong to talk about it.
because if
I have no problem with people. I understand how terrible it is.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that there is, when you look at other parts of the world,
Yeah.
yes, there was also migration in those times. But people still stayed back.
Okay, currently,
They
what
stay back,
country
putting
has
aside
the
selfish
highest
interest
number
or
of
desires.
immigrants when it comes to professional? The same
Yeah.
India that you're talking
No,
about.
but yes, they have the highest number. No. But in terms of proportion, it's different. India has a population of over 1 billion.
Yeah.
Definitely. They will have
We haven't that much abroad
No,
too.
in Nigeria,
I think there is a false sense of how many people are actually emigrating. I know a lot of people are emigrating the country,
Yeah.
but I think the number oftentimes
we
is
are
reported in a very
hemorrhaging human resources. Like, we are bleeding out in Nigeria. We are bleeding out human resources. And why I think that is happening because our culture is more focused on self-preparation or family preparation.
I don't agree. I feel personally it's a new segment. Like I agree with says that now. But when you say culture, the reason why I'm disagreeing is because like it paints a very bad picture of how African societies are. They were not like this. Everybody like sees African culture like it's deeply communal. Now our culture seems to be selfish. We have things like even Pentecostalism is a factor to it. Everybody wants, to prosper for
The
culture is not stagnant. It changes. It evolves.
The
Yeah.
culture from 1960s. Let's say the
Yeah.
Civil War.
Yes.
The Civil War up until now has been one of self-preparation.
I don't disagree.
So you can't bring up the culture. You can't bring up the
That.
culture of. I'll explain that. You can't bring up the culture of 1800s. And it's not relevant to today.
Did you even have one?
You had the communal society. But that was when we had villages. Now you have a country. This is a national structure.
Yeah.
So it's different from the time of when you had villages. Everybody knew, oh, this is more something. This is something. But right now we have a national structure across the world. Right? So the orientation has to be different. And when you look at those other countries that are able to pivot away from the pains and tragedies of colonialism, because people put their lives on the line. They put their lives on the line to ensure that these things change. In Africa or Nigeria, particularly, I can speak about Nigeria, I can speak about Nigeria. In Nigeria, we have a very selfish orientation to life. As well, everybody wants to make it. People just want to make it. When you make it, you're okay. Or if you're not able to make it in Nigeria, you want to jump out. So it's like there's very little national, very little sense of like national drive towards development or drive towards national development. They all need to drive towards that. Everybody thinking about personal development. That's the emphasis. And I think that is the reason why democracy keeps on failing in Africa. That's the reason why development keeps on thriving. Because even that nature of self-foundation, when you get into power, that is what leaders we might say they bring is like ending corruption and cycling of resources. That's self-preservation mindset. Yes, and it starts from you always putting yourself first above the collective. So I think that's the whole perception. I think
Can I
culture
share? Yeah.
is what is driving the online development.